Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog Series. It is Monday, July 14th, 2025, and on Mondays we talk about mathematics and statistics. Some of you know the theme for this week's Dr. J Vlog Series is energy. So I want to briefly discuss in today's vlog the global distribution of energy. You almost certainly already know we currently lack a safe, low carbon, and relatively inexpensive large-scale energy infrastructure. So yes, there are many alternative renewable sources that are currently being used and in development, but even as of 2025, it's the fossil fuels of coal and oil and natural gas that provide about 80%, some estimate as much as 85% of the world's primary energy consumption. So this is important for a couple of reasons. Hundreds of millions of people lack access to adequate, reliable energy to live like we do, for example, in the US and Canada, which may or may not concern you as a human being. But the second reason is the dominance of fossil fuels in our energy system drives our climate change and has other kinds of health impacts like air pollution, that sort of thing. And so that's almost certainly going to concern you, or it should. So globally speaking then, there's also a tremendous geopolitical divide in energy consumption, separating what's often referred to as the global north and the global south. They're not strict geographic descriptions, but mostly they are. So the latter, the global south, refers to Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, and much of Asia, but excluding Japan, South Korea, and Israel, and much of Oceania, but excluding Australia and New Zealand. And so what we know then, of course, is that global energy consumption has significant regional variations due to differences in levels of industrialization, the different climate conditions, especially the colder weather areas, population densities, access to natural resources, what's available, as well as varying energy policies and economic activities across the many different countries of the world. So for instance, countries, as I mentioned a moment ago, with colder climates are going to generally consume much more energy for heating purposes, while highly industrialized nations may have higher per capita energy usage due to their extensive manufacturing sectors. All of this makes logical sense. So from a statistical standpoint then, we can literally quantify and map the per capita energy rates by country. And here's what we find when we actually do that. I do apologize for the relatively low resolution on this particular map. I wasn't able to get the original. I had to download a secondary source as such. But basically, this shows you the distribution and what it's indicating in terms of energy measured by kilowatt hours per person. So the darker red on the map, and you see that mostly in the northern climes in Australia, down in the lower right, of course, the darker red indicates higher energy usage, and then the lighter the color, the lower energy consumption. Okay, and so let's go to a better version. Do this. And I'm going to change up the view here so you can see it better. But okay, so this is a better visual. It's just a simple table, and this indicates then the 15 highest energy consuming nations, some of which some might surprise you actually. But again, this is measured slightly differently. This is measured in terms of per capita primary energy usage, measured that is in the form of gigajoules per person. Okay? So you'll see the number one ranked country in terms of energy consumption, Qatar in the Middle East, 817 gigajoules per person. Second is Iceland. Third, Singapore. Then you've got the UAE, Trinidad and Tobago, Kuwait, Norway. Canada then comes in at 8th at 360 gigajoules per person. Oman, Saudi Arabia, then the United States is there at 11th. Turkmenistan, South Korea, Australia, and then the Russian Federation round out the top 15. So yeah, this is important to understand that all of these countries are consuming energies then based on this combination of industrialization factors, climate issues, primary sources that are available and so on. Qatar, for example, is reliant almost entirely on natural gas, where they've got these huge reserves. And then, of course, Canada and the United States have diverse forms of and large supplies still of fossil fuels, so we're still heavily dependent upon them, reliant upon them as well, and so on. Okay, and then finally, according to I just want to mention, let me just show you here real quickly. So then you'll probably not be surprised then to learn that in terms of overall consumption across continents, that is, that we in North America then have the largest per capita consumption. Okay, so again, across all of North America at 230 gigajoules per person on average. The Commonwealth of Independent States is second, so that again includes Russia and so many other of those countries. The Middle East, then at third, Europe, fourth, and you'll notice there that Europe is almost exactly half the level of energy consumption on a per capita basis compared to North America. I find that interesting. And then we drop down further, much more dramatically, once we get to the Asia Pacific at 67 gigajoules per person, and then the least developed areas overall, on a continental basis, South and Central America, and then Africa drops off dramatically to 14 gigajoules. So some of these countries then, of course, don't have very extensive energy networks or grids, as we call them. And in fact, according to the Energy Institute, upwards of 800 million people worldwide, nearly 1 out of every 10 people, don't even have access to electricity. So, okay, in my view, I guess where I'm going with all of this then is that from a global perspective then, energy sources, that is, what are we relying upon for energy production, consumption, and distribution? How are we going to power our lives, shall we say? To me, that's going to be the single greatest human challenge of the 21st century. Of course, there are going to be many other challenges from food production and distribution, but we've largely solved that problem. But there are still some areas that are obviously dramatically underfed. But then you've got things like ethnic conflicts and territorial disputes that are ongoing. And then you've got issues like health issues and economic inequalities and so on. So there's plenty to deal with. But I believe that the existential question of this century relates to energy. And so we'll continue to examine this concept of energy for the remainder of the Dr. J Vlog series this week. Tomorrow, though, in terms of energy, we're going to be looking at it through the lens of music and the arts. So that's going to give us a very different perspective and way to think about energy. As ever, in the meantime, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, and dole out hugs in abundance. And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow.